going to take things forward from here. Johann?
Thanks, Sushant, and thanks everyone for joining us. Welcome, and I hope you get some actionable insights from this. I think you will, and I look forward to talking to you at the end of the session. If you have any questions, save them up for then. So my name is Johann. I'm COO and Head of Optimization at AWA Digital. We are a CRO agency who specialize in e-commerce optimization, based in the UK, but with offices and clients around the world. And Sushant, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I am Sushant and I handle channel and co-marketing activities at PWO. I come with 6 years of varied experience in digital marketing, during which I've worked on conversion optimization campaigns in e-commerce, SaaS, and travel verticals. I have also driven content and email marketing campaigns for online businesses. In this webinar, I'm going to present case studies that support Johann's theories in e-commerce insight generation, and of course, right along, I'm going to present a few pointers of my own. Over to you, Johann.
Yeah, thanks, Sushant. And you mentioned theories, and I want to say off the bat that today, in today's webinar, we don't want to talk a lot about theories and processes and methodologies. Let's be clear, those things are very important in a CRO campaign, and it can mean the difference between success or not. But what we want to talk about today are really practical things that you can go and do straight after this webinar, tests that you can start running, things that we've seen, patterns that we've observed, little things that you can do to make fairly big changes. And there is one bit of fundamental, I guess, foundational groundwork that I want to lay that everything else builds on top of. And that is when we look at case studies like we're going to be talking about in the next 40 minutes or so, and we talk about changes that were made to pages, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking about optimization as making changes to the page. And of course, that's the way it plays out. That's what we end up doing. But it's very important to remember that on the other side of that web page, on the other side of your website, is a human being, your visitor, your customer, your prospect, somebody with complex thoughts, patterns, thought processes in their mind. And what you do by making changes on the page affects how those processes and thought patterns play out. So it's very important to understand that link, to see that link. The changes that you make on your page, you don't make in isolation. You don't make them for the sake of making changes. You make them in order to affect the outcome, the mental conclusions, the mental processes. That's very important. And so when you think about it that way, the most important thing you can do when you do optimization for e-commerce businesses is to really get into the mind of your customers and your prospects, get under their skin and understand their motivations, understand the fears, the anxieties, the uncertainties, questions that they have about your product that may be unanswered, and also understand their triggers, their desires, their needs, and what could move them forward, what could propel them forward. And the first case study that we're going to talk about today talks about that very compellingly. This is the website of Express Watches in the UK, obviously sells watches. And if you look at their control of the product detail page, you'll see that initially, big messaging around price, and they were at that point and still are the unbeaten on price. But when they started researching this and when they started reaching out to their customers, they discovered that the main anxiety at that point, when people were looking at the product pages, had very little to do with price. It was about authenticity of the product. And so people were asking this question, is this watch authentic, or am I getting a cheap replica? So it sounded too good to be true. And when they started addressing that specific anxiety, that's when interesting things started happening. Sushant, why don't you take us through that case study?
Sorry about that, guys. We had a minor technical glitch, but I believe everything's well now. Johan, I'm going to begin with a little introduction about this particular client. Now, this is High Position, one of VW's most valued clients, which is an integrated digital marketing agency, which was trying to understand what works best for their client, which is Express Watches. Now, Express Watches is a UK-based online retailer of Seiko watches. Now, one major consumer anxiety was whether the watches were actually real or an imitation. Now, the HP group wanted to run a test that would clearly eliminate this particular anxiety. Uh, Let me just move on to the next slide. Yep. So yeah, as you can see on the in the slide itself, to ensure their customers knew that Express Watches stocks only original products, the HP Group replaced an image on the right-hand side of the product that initially said "never beaten on price" in the control version. Now, e-commerce websites that sell branded products need to ensure that customers know the products are original and not an imitation. Well, if your customers are not sure about the originality, they are never convinced about the quality of the product. And any price, any markup price will seem like too much. If you look at the first variation, despite adding the authenticity badge, a lot left to be desired for online users looking for assurance of product authenticity and quality. Now, this problem is especially grave for online shoppers because, let's just face it, unlike a physical store, they don't interact with a salesperson face to face. And moreover, they cannot touch and feel the product online to determine, its authenticity. Now, stressing on originality and authenticity, especially for higher price products, becomes quite important for all these e-commerce stores. If you see here carefully in the next variation, like you had already pointed out, some of the key questions that remain to be answered was, is this company or this website legitimate? Do they assure safe and quick delivery? How safe are their online methods? These are some of the anxieties which need to be addressed by by e-commerce marketers in order to garner more online conversions. Now, if you see the second variation, Express Watches wanted more bangs for the buck that they have already invested for their online presence. They figured out what else could be done here. They came up with the popular yet very simple solution of adding reviews on all product pages of their website. This was a site-wide test, but the problem with testimonials is anyone can display them. Now, there should be something that tells people that they can rely on the credibility of the given testimonials, and this guided Express Watches to their hypothesis for this test. Now, Express Watches needed proof to convince customers of the plausibility of their products and service and to justify the claims that were stated on their website. The site-wide change was made on all product pages, and the larger Trustpilot widget was included. Now, as you can see in the slide itself, this particular widget shows some great customer reviews from the Trustpilot website for one of the product pages. The variation was declared the winner with a percentage improvement of a whopping 58.39% and 99% chance to beat the original version. Now, this test was run for over 2 months and tested thousands of visitors, which made the difference in conversion numbers a lot more relevant, even when the percentage improvement didn't seem to be too high. That becomes clear that the anxieties of visitors that were earlier a barrier in their purchase decision were successfully removed to a great extent by this particular test. Moving on, I think to sum it up, trust badges, reviews, and testimonials are a great way to get validation for your products. Social proof is important. Your visitors always want to know who else has or who else wants your products. And reviews and testimonials serve as the perfect validation for as social proof for your products. In fact, adding security seals imparts that extra bit of credibility to your product, which again evokes more customer trust. VWO did this very elaborate e-commerce report in 2014, which postulated that 54% of online shoppers find reviews a very important factor when they have to make a purchasing decision. So what do? You collect reviews to follow up emails. You you create this process where you incentivize or maybe even gamify reviews through discount coupons. You share your customers with giveaways and create competitions to again evoke more participation from your customers. Now, I think it would be best if Jon takes over and tells you something about existence test. Jon, you want to take over?
Yeah, just before I do that, what I like about the case study that you've just shown is also, you know, the iteration. So the client didn't just stick to the first outcome of the first outcome of the first split test. They built on that. It's something we get back to later on. And just one more general thing to say about reviews, perhaps, and testimonials more specifically, is where testimonials really work very well. And we've done a lot of testing around testimonials and reviews. And where they really become very powerful is where they speak directly to the anxieties and the sales objections. So again, it's coming back to the point that I made right at the outset of this webinar. If you understand what those are, then you can seek out those testimonials that target those anxieties specifically. You can even solicit comments around that specifically. But moving on to the next tactic, this is an interesting one. We've been talking about adding things onto pages, whether it's reviews or messages, it's adding things onto the page, and typically that's what we do with split testing. But this is a tactic that's often neglected. I find that not many people use this, and it's a very interesting one and a very valuable one. Existence tests, also called exclusion tests. Really what it is you're taking an existing element on your page and you remove it. So you run a split test where you remove that element, you hide the element from the page. And you may think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, there are a number of reasons. The two most prominent ones are, one, you can see whether it acts as abstraction. Two, you can see what the value, you can actually quantify the real value that element adds to the process. And here's a list. This list is by no means exhaustive, is just to get you started. I'll pick out a few of them. Some of them were quite counterintuitive in a way. And the first one, for example, product recommendation engines. Now, the reason we add product recommendation engines to our websites is to increase sales. It's to drive average order value. So why would you want to remove it? Well, it's going back to that point that I've just made. We've done many tests around this, and it's always very interesting, the outcome. And in many cases, it's certainly more than half of the tests that we've run in this area. We've seen either no impact on sales when we remove the product recommendation engine, or worse, we've seen an uplift in sales. So high conversion rate, higher revenue if we remove the product recommendation engine. Now, again, that's not meant to be the end of the road. That doesn't mean you have to remove your PRE and leave it at the site. What it alludes to is that perhaps the PRE is in the wrong place on the page. It's in the wrong location. You have to move it to a different spot on the page. It could be that. Or it could be that there's something that's not optimal about the algorithm. You have to adapt and adjust the algorithm. We've done a lot of testing around that aspect as well and had great successes there. But certainly it's worth quantifying that value. The other one I want to pick up on is messaging. So delivery is right at the top there. You know, all our websites, delivery is always one of those things that when you talk to customers and prospects, it's one of those themes that bubble up to the top. It's always an issue, whether it's time frame or the cost of delivery, whatever it is. And you know, we react to that by placing messages throughout the site around delivery, and it's really worth, because it's such a prominent theme that keeps on coming up again, and it's such a prominent source of anxiety. It's worth doing a very extensive testing around any delivery messages, and that includes placement. You know, whether they're there or not. The far more interesting one, and also very counterintuitive, is around guarantees and returns. So this is one of those best practices, and it's hard to argue with that. It makes sense if you think about this, that when you're selling something, offering a good guarantee and having a solid returns policy, it's got to be good for the sales process, right? There's no other way to look at it. And yet, sometimes it gets in the way. And I'll give you a very interesting case study that we recently ran. So the client is, they sell toys, educational toys, and their customer base is mainly parents, but also a lot of grandparents, about 50-50. And when we removed the guarantee and returns messages, we got it on the product page specifically. We got a big uplift and a solid uplift. And this was interesting. And the reason for that is When you're a grandparent and you're buying a present, a gift for your grandchild, the last thing at that point that you want to contemplate is having to return it, is having to send it back. So, in other words, the gift doesn't work out. You're giving a gift to your grandson or granddaughter in order to achieve something very specific. By having to return it, it dilutes that. So, that was the rationale behind that. And it's the kind of thing that you would never have come across if we didn't run that specific test. And then even something as logical as social sharing, can get in the way. We've seen a lot of evidence on that. And in fact, we have a very interesting case study about that. Sushant, can you talk us through that one?
Great. In fact, those were some very key insights that you offered about the value of on-page elements. And I'm going to take this case for social state sharing. Now, unlike what others believe, featuring social sharing widgets on your pages might not be the best of ideas every time. In fact, I go on to the extent of saying that social sharing widgets themselves can be a double-edged sword. They can be a friend, they can be a foe. Now, we have seen that social sharing widgets can increase page load times by 7%. Now, when you look at it in the broader scheme of things, and when you're talking about online sessions to the order of maybe 1 lakh sessions in a day, or maybe 10,000, maybe 50,000 sessions in a day, that makes a whole lot of difference. Not only that, low number of social shares can work as a negative social proof. Also, they obviously occupy a lot of real estate space on your product pages. Also, if your website visitors don't frequently share purchases on social media, it might not be the best of ideas to actually feature them. Also, they serve as a distraction when the goal of the page is to get visitors to buy. I'll speak a little more about this later. Also, I'd suggest that if social doesn't actually constitute a major source of your traffic, you might as well consider removing them. Maybe set up a split test and test them out on thank you pages. But yeah, removing social sharing widgets, on the right product pages and not distract your users might be a very good conversion strategy. And I have a very interesting case study to back that up. Now, Talon.com is a Finland-based hardware e-commerce store, of course, a VWO client that sells plumbing, electrical, gardening, and other construction material. Now, while Talon.com used a prominent CTA on its product pages, which was add to cart, the social sharing buttons acted as a distraction. So, Talium.com wanted to increase clicks on their product pages, main CTA button, which was again add to cart. And as you can see, this is how the original product page looked. You can see that the social sharing buttons are placed right below the product photos. And guys over at Talon wanted to see if removing the buttons will have any impact on the main CTA. Now, the head marketer at Talon.com, Yanni Fanti, went against the popular notion of featuring social sharing widgets and removed all the Google Plus, Pinterest, and Facebook share buttons from its product pages. Now you can see that you can see in this particular slide that the social sharing buttons are placed right below the product photos. Yari wanted to see if the A/B test will have any impact on the main CTA button. Will the conversions go up? So what he did was he removed them. Now, not so surprisingly, there was an increase in sale of 12%. However, normal logic would dictate that these results should be surprising. And now, why is that? Number one, around 39% of digital marketers around the world believe social sharing is very effective in boosting conversions. Also, 84% of online shoppers use at least one social media site, and that gives you a lot of mileage on all these social media channels. Now, it is very easy to deduct from the above two statements and many more which proclaim the benefits of social sharing that adding these buttons on e-commerce sites can actually increase your social media presence and maybe even earn you new fans. So I'd like to think about it. I'd like to see what worked against social sharing buttons in the first place. Number one, negative social proof might be a huge downer for them. Now, according to Yanni, the number of shares on most of his product pages was zero, while a high number of shares and likes act as a positive reinforcement. Uh, Conversely, a low number of shares breed a sense of distrust in the mind of customers about both the company and the quality of the product. In fact, Neil Patel from QuickSprout actually said that social proof isn't always the best proof. You would think that social proof helps boost conversion rates, but it doesn't always work that way. Another factor might be that social sharing widgets themselves are a huge distraction from the main goal. It is usually considered a best practice to have one clearly defined goal for each page and push your audience towards that particular goal using the CTA. Now, when you have these social sharing widgets on your page, remember you are giving more and more reasons for your consumer to think. Do they go for the CTA button? Do they click on the social sharing widget? Do they post a testimonial there and there? Do they do anything else? It's always a healthy practice to feature just one particular CTA on each of your product pages, which is exactly where social sharing widgets are a huge distraction. Now that we have established the two-sworded nature of social sharing buttons, let's just move on to A/B testing CTA button text. Of course, goes without saying that with, setting up an A/B test for CTA button text is one of the easiest tests and is mainly prescribed for beginners. Uh, your CTA answers the most critical question: why should I click this button? So it makes a lot of sense to avoid generic call to actions and make them more actionable. As you can see in the example in this particular slide, uh, if your CTA button text is just a very boring download, you can use a more exciting or a more lucrative offer like get your free ebook or give them a free offer. Also, a simple buy now would not do as well as maybe just suggesting what is the percentage of discount that your customers are going to get if they hit the click here CTA button. Now, again, to back this up, I have this another case study from one of our VWO's clients, which are Empire Flippers. uh, a little background on Empire Flippers. They run this marketplace model where people can list their established and profitable websites for sale. Now, Empire Flippers' main goal is to become the number one place people go to when they think about virtual real estate. So, if you have a website that you think has great potential and is already doing well, and for some reason you want to maybe auction the website, Empire Flippers is a place where you can list your website, and all the other users are going to place bids, and yeah, the highest bid gets a website. Now, as you can see here, the original page was not very clear about what was being offered. Now, on the internet, if you want people to take action, you better give them a good enough reason to do it. Folks at Empire Flippers wanted to improve the CTR, or click through rate, of their CTA button on the right. For this purpose, they ran multiple A/B tests before deciding on an image that showed the best conversion rate. After that, they decided to keep all the other elements same and just keep on changing the CTA text to see whether it had any effect on the clicks. Now, one way of improving the attractiveness of an offer is to answer the what's in it for me. This is a question that has to be answered right off the bat, and this is exactly what Empire Flippers did, as you can see in this particular slide. The text in the challenger, making money flipping websites, makes it clear that by clicking on this button, you get the opportunity to make money flipping websites. Yeah, they made it so obvious that it became so lucrative for their visitors to actually hit the CTA button. Now compare this to the original very boring joiners text in the CTA, and you understand why this particular variation worked rather well. Now it does not really convey anything, and is thus less compelling. And I mean this for the original variation. So you see, CTA button themselves, CTA button text play a huge role in deciding what is going to be the outcome or what is going to be the conversion of your product page. The more appealing, the more lucrative is the CTA button text, the higher are your chances of people actually hitting the CTA button. Uh, Johan, I think you have something else
Sushant,
to. Yeah, please go ahead.
yeah, I'll add to that, and before I do that, add two things to that. I'll make the point that what Sushant is talking about here is not color buttons, button colors, mind you. It's button text, and there's a fundamental difference there. With going back to my introduction about getting into the mind of your customers, when you're changing button colors on a website, what you're doing is really affecting changes on the page, and there's no real direct further link to them. When you're changing the things that Sushant have been talking about, button text, language, wording, that's affecting what happens in the mind of the viewer of that specific button. So it's got a direct link back to the things we spoke about earlier, anxieties, fears, and overcoming those. And that's the difference. That's the fundamental difference between the two. And there's loads of case studies about button colors having made a difference, but you can't base your strategy on that, and it's generally down to a stroke of luck. And as I say, very little direct link to that really fundamental stuff we spoke about earlier. The two other points I want to make here is regarding calls to action and buttons on the side. One, that as far as possible, try to have one primary button, and when you have secondary calls to action, try to demote them so they don't compete. They don't have the same weight. Maybe even a text link, maybe not quite as dramatic, but certainly not the same weight as your primary call to action button. You've got to be very clear about the path you want your visitors to follow. And the second thing is that to get somebody to click the button, and Sushant's given us some very interesting food for thought around how to make it more likely that somebody will actually click on that button. But there's something else that's very important, and that's, again, coming back to my comments right at the beginning about anxieties and fears and motivations. If you understand that, then you can enable that trigger far more effectively by having messaging and triggers in close proximity to the button that counter those anxieties and sales objections and fears that you've uncovered. So the two go hand in hand. So now I want to talk about something else. Sushant, if you can move us to the next slide. It's also a mistake that I see a lot of people make, and it's that they neglect to iterate on their split tests. So you go through the cycle, if you imagine the cycle, where at some point you've got enough data or some hunch that informs an hypothesis, and the split test tests this hypothesis. And then you've got either one of two outcomes. It's a win, and typically what happens then is the changes are made live on the site and you forget about it. Or it's inconclusive or a negative result, and what happens then is it's a dead end. It becomes the end of the road. And that's the wrong approach. It leaves a lot of money on the table. It's a big opportunity cost. You've already invested the effort in coming up with that hypothesis, doing the analysis behind it. And what you should do is then refine and alter and expand and build on that hypothesis. And if it wasn't working, then figure out why it didn't work, and come up with another way of doing it, of attacking that problem. The problem doesn't go away that you uncovered. It's just your execution of it in that specific test that didn't work. And a very inspirational story and a famous story to look up to here is the one of Thomas Edison when he discovered the light bulb. He went through a series of experiments in the order of several thousands that didn't work. And at some point he was asked by somebody how he felt about all these failures. And this is a famous quote by Thomas Edison. He said that he didn't fail once. He found 10,000 ways in which it didn't work. And that brought him 10,000 steps closer to something that did eventually work. And that's how you should look at your split tests. So it's very important to iterate and build on your learnings, whether it's positive or negative. And the next case study, also from the VWO archive, is a good example of that. Sushant, do you want to talk us through that?
But before that, I want to talk about a very interesting point you made on developing testable predictions. I remember only a month back we did this whole webinar on generating testing hypotheses based on user behavior. And if you analyze your users' on-site behavior, if you monitor their navigational patterns, see their transactional data, see their behavioral data, I think a lot of insights, and we as marketers often tend to forget that the biggest source of information actually lies in the GA tool, the Google Analytics tool, or maybe any other tool that you're using for your particular website. So Yes, a lot of interesting A/B testing hypotheses can be easily generated if we pay a lot of attention to online users' online behavior. But more on that later. I'm going to move to this new case study that we're going to feature. Now, this is one of VWO's client once again, and this is paperstone.co.uk. Now, paperstone.co.uk operated on a very simple A/B testing hypothesis. They wanted to display their competitors' higher prices on 5,000 product pages, and they thought this is going to increase clicks on the add to basket, which was the CTA, and their overall website conversion rates. Now, Paperstone ran this test for over 12,000 unique visitors, and this was a 50-50 split test between the control and variation. The result was largely inconclusive for both conversions and the CTA, which was add to basket, although both were reported as performing more poorly in the variation than the control. Now, what differed here was in the variation was that when changes were made to this variation, some of the strategies that included was that guys over at Paperstone, they moved competitor pricing module below the add to basket CTA button. Now they wanted to see if moving the add to basket button down in variation was having a negative impact on add to basket once again. Now, if you see this particular slide carefully, they also put the Paperstone price next to the competitor price in the module, which highlighted the saving. This was to make it easier for users to see the actual savings they were making when they were purchasing from Paperstone. They also made the design look really corporate looking and gave a modular header of price comparison. Now, this was, it was initially thought that the previous style may have been causing banner blindness, and adding the price comparison header made it very clear for users to follow the workflow that guys over at Paperstone wanted them to. This resulted in overall higher conversions for their product page. This has been a classic example of how the correct on-page elements positioning can actually make a huge impact on your product page conversions. In fact, not only the prices, not only the CTA button, one should always be testing all the different on-page elements and try positioning them in different order. Maybe your headlines, maybe your CTA button, maybe your customer review widgets, maybe your social sharing widgets if you're using them. So positioning all these elements differently is again you're gonna have to A/B test these things a lot, but then you will come together to a combination of on-page elements positioning, which will eventually garner a lot more on-page conversions for you. So yeah, that's this about this particular case study. Johann, you want to take this up?
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite case studies and ones that I've referenced many times before. And I'm glad that we had two case studies where you could see this process of iteration. Where the first result is not accepted or not the end of the road, and that you really build on that, whether it's positive, but especially if it's negative, building on it. Sushant, can you move us to the summary slide? We've come to the end of this part of the presentation. There's still some time for questions. So if you have questions, I see a couple have come in already. But if you have more questions, please do post them there, and we'll straight after the summary we'll get into that and we'll answer any questions you may have. I just want to go and summarize the key takeaways that we spoke about, and again try and make it as practical as possible. The first thing I said is the importance of getting into the mind of your customer, not only the mind of your customer, the mind of your prospects, the mind of your visitors, really get under their skin. And it's about more than fears and uncertainties and desires. It's also about their motivation and their needs and desires, and really understand that. Also the sales objections, and if you can understand the sales objections, so the questions, the unanswered questions, the niggling issues that people have with stepping over that final line, then you can chip away at that systematically, and that's one of the best ways of making a big improvement on your site. And remember, it doesn't have to happen in one day. it's all compounded. So if you do that over a period of time, then you'll be much better off at the end of that period. So just chip away at it systematically. The second thing we spoke about is reviews and testimonials. And we all know about reviews and testimonials. We touched on the importance of really having a plan to acquire those reviews and testimonials, and more specifically, targeting those ones that are meaningful. You get less meaningful and more meaningful reviews and testimonials, and figuring out a way to solicit those ones that that will be more compelling, ones that speak specifically to objections. And so Sushant took us through some practical ways of doing that. Then we spoke about exclusion tests, very interesting one. And in fact, VWO have just launched recently their quick learnings mode. If you haven't tried that yet, here's a great way that you can start. Fire up VWO in quick learnings mode and run a few exclusion tests across the site. Think about the kind of things that you'd really like to understand the value of. And I mean, don't do stupid things like remove your call to action buttons and your add to cart buttons and that kind of thing. But you know, the kind of things around it, the things that are potentially distracting. And I gave you a list which is a good starting point. And I should say that challenge yourself with that. If you, for example, with a product recommendation engine that I spoke about, and also the guarantees messages, it's the kind of thing that's counterintuitive, the kind of thing that you know, if you think about it the first time, you maybe think, nah, it's not worth it. Obviously, it's going to decrease our sales. Challenge yourself and really be open to what you will learn from that test. Go into that split test with an open mind and really see where it takes you and you know, see what you can learn from it and how you can build on that. We spoke along with that about removing potential distractions. Spoke about social sharing, another common one, one that's often cited as best practice is in the checkout process where you have the navigation. A very good way of uncovering potential distractions is to look at heat maps. And you can now track that within VWO as well. But there's some other tools that you may have on your site that track heat maps. But look at your heat maps and see whether the clicks are going onto the elements where you expect them to go. And be very wary of clicks going on other elements that are potentially distracting, taking visitors down paths that are less profitable, less productive. So be wary of that, and then remove those distractions. Then we spoke a lot about CTA, call to action buttons, text and style, and the importance of aligning the message with the outcome, the expected outcome. And the really big difference a few words can make, and it's you will be surprised at the impact that a small change like that can have, as long, again, as you understand the link to the patterns and the thought processes in the user's mind. And then lastly, we spoke quite a bit today about learning from not only negative split tests, but especially negative split tests. See that negative result as an opportunity to learn, try and figure out what it is that didn't work about it. And in VWO, you've got access to heat maps and all kinds of other additional tools. If you integrate it with GA, for example, you can get some additional analysis, additional depths of layers of information that will help you to understand why it didn't work, and then adjust your hypothesis and build on it. Do what Thomas Edison did. Don't give up at the point where you're about to make a breakthrough. And yeah, so that brings us to the end of the session. But
Johann,
let's see what questions
I have
you have.
Johann, I have a little something that I'd like to share with our audience today. At VWO, we are always stressing on the fact that the best strategy for A/B testing is, to come up with winning variations is to keep A/B testing, different elements, to keep A/B testing different strategies, to keep A/B testing your content marketing strategies. Anything that can be tested should be tested. And of late, we have seen this pattern, this widespread pattern amongst our customers who are doing more and more A/B testing of late, and they are coming with some very explicitly winning variations. So my 2 cents, my little tip that I can give to all our audiences is do not shy, like you've been saying all this while. Do not shy away from A/B testing, split testing. Whatever strikes your fancy. If you think, of course, when split testing, you can always play around with the ratios. It doesn't have to be a 50-50 split test. It can always be 90-10 or maybe 80-20 test as well. But the important part is to keep testing and look out for different winning combinations. I think we are set for now. In another couple of minutes, we'll start with the Q&A session. Please keep shooting questions using the Q&A feature in your dashboard, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And if your questions still remain unanswered, we'll make sure that we'll answer your questions in the in the event recording and event transcript that we email out to you. See you in a
Shall
couple.
I dive into the first question?
Yeah, let's just start with the question Q&A session in another minute or so. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Before we start with the Q&A session, let me remind everyone that we'll be emailing out the webinar recording and the entire slide deck to all registrants of the events. If you want to share the slide deck and the webinar recording with your friends, with your colleagues, ask them to sign up for the event, and we'll do likewise for them. John, you ready to take up the Q&A session now?
Yes, I've got 4 here so far. I'll start with the first one. Interesting question, a good one. Thanks for asking it. I spoke about stepping into the mind of the customer quite frequently, and the question is, how do you do that? And there are several ways in which you can do it, but you can't get away from actually speaking to the customer, speaking to the prospect. And you do that with, for example, surveys. And there are 2 ways of doing surveys. The one is sending an email survey, and the other one is having on-site surveys. And they serve slightly different purposes. Email surveys is great to ask questions about demographic data, but also ask them about their needs, their desires, the reason they bought from you. Some of the questions I typically ask include, who else did you consider buying from? Why did you end up buying from us in the end? That gives you some insight into your value proposition from the customer's perspective. I sometimes ask them what difference this made in their life, what difference the product made in their life, how it was different to what they expected. I ask them also what, maybe not in this phrase like this, but I try to phrase it in the way that the question is, what need were you trying to address when you bought this product? It's that back to that famous quote of, I think it was Theodore Levitt from Harvard Business School, who said, you don't buy a quarter-inch drill, you buy the hole in the wall. And so what I try to get at when I ask these questions is, what is the hole in the wall? What is the real need that you tried to meet when you bought the products? And then for on-site surveys, if you've uncovered something, it could be through a funnel analysis in GA. There's a leak in your funnel, or there's a high exit rate on a particular page, and then you might ask questions, targeted questions, very specific questions on that page. And a good example of that is a while ago we worked with a luxury fashion retailer in the UK, but with a global presence. And one of the products they sold was a handbag, quite an expensive handbag, and they got a lot of visits to this page, a lot of views on the page, but very low conversion rate. So the interest was there, but it just didn't follow through. And we had all kinds of ideas about what could be the issue there, but we asked the question on that page very directly and very bluntly. On exit, when people left the page, we asked them, why did you not purchase this product? And a couple of things came through, but the main theme from it was that they didn't know how to match it, what to match it with. And when you go into a store, you've got a shop assistant to speak to, you've got maybe a mannequin and some presentation that shows how it's matched. Whereas online, it's it wasn't there. That additional context wasn't there. And so with that knowledge, we could address that anxiety very specifically. And then the other way to step into the mind of your user, and for me personally, nothing beats this, is by doing moderated usability testing. Now we all know unmoderated usability testing, where you go into a website and you use their panelists to make a video of their walk through the site. So what we do is we actually set up, we do live recruitment. So we have a pop-up on the site when visitors are on the site, and we invite them to participate in live research. And then we ask them a series of questions, and if they're qualified based on those questions, we phone them up immediately, and we have a live interview with them. We set up screen sharing between us, and we actually get to talk to a real visitor in real time, and that's a really good source of information, and always actionable insights from that. The second question I have is about common uncertainties. So what sort of anxieties and uncertainties do we commonly find across websites? It's not that easy, because it really is different for every website. But if I have to think about the commonalities, I mentioned delivery early on. That's not really an uncertainty, it's more an anxiety. I guess the top one would have to be, I'd say, touch and feel, the lack of touch and feel. So when you sell something online, you know the story. It's this inability to interact with the product, and that causes some uncertainties. And the way to address that, well, a number of things. One, again, you've got to understand what those questions are. What are those unanswered questions? Because if you do, then you can answer it in your copy, in your product copy. But more fundamental than that, if you use sensory language and language that will that will enable the user to imagine them using this product, so it's beyond the features and benefits, it's actually into the realm of using this product, that works very well. But I think the number one strategy here, and it's again such an obvious one, but often overlooked. I'm surprised at the number of times I come across websites, big successful websites, who neglect this one, is product images. And there it is. It sounds obvious, but I'll unpack it a bit. So it's sometimes it's as simple as making your product images larger, because people really scrutinize the product image, and what they want to do is they want to see that product from different angles. It's like going to the shelf in the store and picking it up and examining it from different angles. It's emulating that experience. So the more angles you can have in alternative images, and think about the kind of questions that people may have about the product. So, for example, in a homeware site that I worked on, and they sell luxury furniture and expensive furniture and homeware, and the kind of questions that existed there were, for example, a rug, something as simple as a rug. People wanted to see the side of the rug so they could judge how thick it is. They wanted to see the bottom of the rug, the back side, so they could judge the quality from the joints. So they look at images and they assess quality and also perspective. So another website that I work for, and they sell things for children, clothing and toys and things for babies and toddlers, and it often what people were wondering about there was about perspective. How big is this toy? You know, from a photograph, just showing the toy, you can't really judge. People want to see the box in which the toy comes. And so I think that would be my number one strategy, is to really invest in your product photography and to make the images large, and to have alternative images, numerous alternative images, but not just for the sake of having alternative images, things that answer additional questions. Let's see what other questions we got here. I'm reading, Adam, your question. You mentioned the exclusion of a free returns and guarantee in a toy store from the product page, but did you add it anywhere else on the site, cart or checkout pages? Yes, absolutely. And thanks for asking that question. It gets back to the other point that I made, which is building on your tests. And so obviously the finding, as Adam rightly points out there, was that on the product detail page, the guarantee was a distraction, but further down the funnel, and I don't remember exactly whether it was in the cart or in the checkout, but certainly further down the funnel, that same message did have an impact, and it's about matching the location in the funnel with the expectation at that point, and yeah, another example of building on this test. Here's another. I hope that answers it, Adam. Here's another one. The percentage of split tests that are negative. Right, so the question is, we referred to negative split tests, and the question is what percentage of split tests is negative. It's a really difficult one to answer. I heard an industry average, make of this what you want. It's an industry average that it's between 40 and 60% of split tests are negative. It's not entirely our experience, but you know, the fact is you will always have a portion of your split tests will always be negative, and it's not to be alarmed by that, not to be put off by that, and to really, if you find that you split that a large percentage of your split tests are starting to become negative, then I would suggest what you do is go back to basics, go back to your analysis, go back to your research, speak to another customer, reach out to customers, do a survey, and what you're looking for is just one jewel, something that can point you in a direction. And then one more question. This is also a good question. So how to test when you are small? So I assume what the question means is when you don't have a lot of traffic. All the case study we spoke about was about lots of traffic behind it, and how do you do it when you don't have that much traffic? And yes, it's more difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It means that you have to make trade-offs. So it means that, for example, you have to run fewer variations. So instead of running 3 or 4 variations or even 2 variations, you have 1 variation, 1 challenger. It means that having to run the split test for a longer duration. So what if instead of waiting 2 weeks, you've got to wait a month or even 6 weeks or even 8 weeks? At the end of that, you will have a far more informed decision. You will be able to make an informed business decision. You will have learned something that you can build on. And the other bit of advice I can give you is look at areas in the site where you get a lot of traffic. So don't segment too deeply. Don't look for too finely segmented experiences. If you've got a lot less traffic in your checkout, then, well, it's a test that will have to run for a very long time potentially. But maybe on the product pages, if you add all the product pages together, look at it from a templatized perspective. So instead of running a test on just the home page, for example, maybe if you put all the product pages together, product detail pages together, you've got 2 or 3 times the amount of traffic. Or a global test where you test the headlines, the headers and the footers, global messages, that sort of thing. So yeah, and then the other bit of advice, I think the last bit of advice on that particular question is think about maybe using different metrics. So the primary metric that we normally try to use on any e-commerce project is revenue per visitor. For revenue per visitor, you need big traffic. You need lots of traffic, and you need typically, unless you've got a big uplift, you need good traffic behind it, and you need lots of transactions. And that's because of the variance in revenue. Now, just one step away from that is conversion rate, overall sales conversion rate. So that's something you can do with slightly less traffic. If you've got even less traffic than that, and you can work this out by looking at the test duration calculator on VWO. But if you've got too little traffic to do that, even in a reasonable amount of time, then you might consider taking it a step further down. So you might look at progression to the next page, or you might look even at a very hyper local metric, something like clicks on the add to cart button. And but I would say this: only do this if you have a good reason to do it. If you have, for example, you've got tiny amounts of traffic. Always try and get as close as possible to the revenue. And I think we're almost out of time. So Sushant, I want to throw it back at you and see if there's any additional comments you want to make before we sign off.
Oh, thank you for your insights. Thank you for answering all those questions. Some of them were a little hardball, I'd say. I only have to contribute regarding the question on negative split test results. I think, like you just mentioned, the best strategy if you're getting a lot of negative test results is you go back to the drawing board, do a lot of user research. But having done all this user research, it is very important to invest a lot of time and a lot of really strategize user personalization. I think that is one topic that we haven't touched on at all. The most appropriate giveaway, or maybe I should say the next strategy, the next step after you've done all your user researches, to create a strategy around user personalization. Like you were saying, maybe send global messages for audience from all around the world. So I would just suggest that it would make even greater sense if you could set up personalized CTAs, personalized message, across the website for demographically segmented, maybe user segmented on the basis of their location, user segmented on the basis of their behavior, their transactions on the website. So if you do a lot of personalization, it strikes an instant connect with your users, and based on which you can easily ascertain that the conversions are going to go up. I think that was the only point I wanted to make about user personalization. And yeah, I mean, that's all from my end. And and I think I'm speaking on behalf of Johann as well when I say that we really hope that you benefited from some, if not all, of the insights that we had to offer today. Uh, I wish you a fantastic holiday season. Namaste and talk soon. Johan?
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, and please be in touch. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, goodbye and good night. Bye.